next is a vital panel panel chat about women in tech. Women have always found their power in industries that might have seemed unattainable to them, and none are more so than them in STEM: science, technology, engineering, and maths. Join us now to hear a fantastic panel discuss the obstacles that women are making and overcoming in the tech industry. Find out what they face and hear some of their advice as to how they can help empower other women and girls get into the career that they need, that they want, and in this particular field. A must watch for anyone who is intrigued by a career in tech. We have got Carrie Swatton, who's hosting, Nicola Shurman. I hope I got that right. Please introduce yourselves when you're up on the Zoom and pronounce your names rightly. Kate Neal, Liz Crew, and Samantha Fiden. Thank you so much for being part of this. Take it away.
Hello, and welcome to our Women in Tech panel talk today. Thanks to POW Thanet for inviting us to take up space here to talk about our industry. I am your host for this session, Carrie Swatton. We'll have a good time to talk today, and there'll be 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to your questions. But firstly, a little intro on myself. I've worked in the tech industry for 20 years now. My work covers 3 areas currently. Most of my time is taken up with a full-time role with a global fintech company as a product manager. I'll talk to you a little bit about what product management is in a moment. In my spare time, I run a community social media account called Keep Good Company, where the sole purpose is to empower and advocate for women in tech. I'm also a board member for a local co-working space here in Margate called The Geekery. It's a growing community focused around all things tech. They run meetups where anyone can share their knowledge on subjects or work in collaborative projects. They also have a makerspace. If anyone is wondering what a product manager does, I work to understand customer wants and needs in terms of using products and services. And then I work with all parts of an organization, from the business to software developers and design, to build a product, as well as working with marketers and salespeople to get that product out to the market in the right way. Enough about me. Let's talk about our guests we have to talk today. I'm super excited to welcome the 4 fantastic guests. We all come from very different backgrounds and do quite different things within the industry. We'll be sharing our views as well as some of the obstacles we have faced. But before we dig in, I'd like to introduce my guests on the panel. Firstly, we have Samantha Fiden, who is a tech creative. She runs a brilliant Instagram account called Becoming Samantha, where she shares her journey on working in the tech industry. Next up, we have Liz Crew, Chief Operating Officer of Tech Resorts, which is a social enterprise advocating and coaching all aspects of digital skills down in Eastbourne. Then we have Nicola Shurman, who is a digital artist and one half of Genetic Moo. She's a Margate resident here. They are creators of immersive and interactive experiences. And lastly, we have Kate Neal, who is a director of Horton Neal Design Studio, which is a multidisciplinary studio here in Margate. Specialises in design for museums, science centres and heritage sites. And she's also the founder of the Geek Festival. So thank you all so much for each joining us today and sharing your views with the audience. I want to kick us off with this preconceived idea that you have to have a degree in programming to work in tech, and the only roles that are focused are around coding. I myself studied sociology and psychology in college, which was a really great stepping stone to the main role that I've had most of my career in tech as a product manager, working with all different types of people, stakeholders, and different personality groups. Can you each give us an intro into how you started your career in tech digital and how that's pivoted over time to what you're doing now? Samantha, can I start with yourself?
Yes, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. Really blessed to be here today. So I guess my journey in tech started after university. I studied computer science. So some people may say that I took the traditional route to enter tech, but actually I didn't know what I wanted to do for a really long time. But I felt that technology for me was a way to really create solutions to problems. Initially, I started off really enjoying maths at a young age, was able to kind of achieving a few exams early, doing GCSE in maths and statistics and things like that at 6 years old. But I think after maths taught me kind of how to logically think, computer science showed me how to actually create solutions. So during my university time, I had experience in the kind of financial services industry, being able to basically do application development for traders. And outside of that experience, I also had various other experiences trying to do like kind of business analyst roles and things like that. But I think what I found was that I really like talking to people about technology, and I really found like I wanted to know, a purpose behind what I was doing. And that kind of led me to Microsoft, which is where I am now. I currently work as a customer success account manager, and this is a role that I never even knew existed a couple of years ago. So I feel like I've almost fallen into it. But your first point about people assuming that the technology industry just equals coders is something that I try to demystify using my platform, Becoming Samantha, which just follows my journey through life, sharing my tech and my life learning. So yeah, some people may say I took the traditional route, but I think I've really just tried to ask questions along the way, be curious, and it's kind of landed me where I am today.
Thanks, Samantha. What about you, Kate? How did you kind of start, and where, and how have you ended up where you are now?
I think it's probably diametrically opposed from what Samantha's just said. My background is theatre. I trained as a theatre designer, and I was at the BBC. And actually, I was sitting at home with two small children, wondering how on earth I was going to claw my way back into the workplace, because I'd sort of stepped out of it. And I managed to get myself into a professional development course at Middlesex University. Most of it was really boring. It was about CVs and stuff like that. I hope they're not listening, but there was a room full of computers, and this is way early 90s, and I walked into a room full of computers, and it was love at first sight. Suddenly, I could make things. I've always worked with collage, and suddenly I could keep making collages. They kept moving around forever, so I've just played with computers ever since.
Brilliant. What about you, Nicola? Because you've got an interesting background.
Yes, so I started off with analog technology. So when I was about 14 years old, I learned how to do black and white photography and process it myself. And I discovered I really like working with chemicals. And that led me to a foundation course, art and design foundation course, where I did more work with photography, and then started working with VHS video. And I thought, yeah, I want to do more of this. And I I did my BA at North East London Poly and studied 16mm film. And it was an interesting time, actually, because on that course I was studying, my year was 7 women, which was really unusual, but it meant that it was just like everything was equal. We were all teaching each other and learning together. And I was trying to do quite complicated things with 16mm, like superimposition, where you had to do it in the camera, or, we did our own processing and that, and it could be quite expensive. And then I remember going to Stuttgart Animation Festival and being introduced to Avid, which was a non-linear editing system. It just come out, and I realized, okay, this is what I've been waiting for. So as much as I love celluloid, I thought, it's got to be digital. So I taught myself. I mean, a lot of people will say that they get, as long as you've got access to technology, there's a tremendous amount that you have to do for yourself as well. I set up an art group in the early 2000s. That was filmmakers, performance artists, coders, and what have you. And we created things together, but we also taught each other as well. So that was incredibly useful. And that introduced me to the power of code. So although I know technology isn't all about code, in fact, I got really excited about using code to make non-linear films. So films, instead of having the passive audience sitting down watching it, the audience could be active, moving around. So this was sort of experimenting in immersive, expanded cinema. And I got so excited by it that I thought, okay, I've been waiting to decide what to do an MA in, and suddenly I knew that I wanted to do an electronic arts MA, which I did at the Lansdowne Centre for Electronic Arts. And so here I am.
Amazing. What about you, Liz? Would you like to talk a little bit about, your background, and then how you've ended up kind of running Tech Resort?
Well, I never thought of myself as being in the tech industry until you asked me about it, Karen. I started out in financial services back in the dim distant, very early 80s when I started in an insurance company running pension schemes when pension schemes were a thing. And it was a part of the industry that didn't use computers at all. Everything was manual. And I remember asking my managers, because I'd been playing with computers since I was about 14, which was very unusual back then, such a long time ago, and saying, we should have computers do stuff. And they just laughed me out the room. So I thought, well, fair enough. But they did sponsor the first part of my OU degree in computer science. And then when I came back from doing that, I got involved increasingly in projects that computerized just small parts of what it was we did, from this process to a small process over here to some record keeping. And then from then on in, pretty much everything I did in that company over the remainder of the 27 years I worked for them was to help get people used to using the computer systems that now they wouldn't think twice about. And they were all people kind of my age, so quite old, and really struggled moving into the digital age. So when I said, well, I think I've done enough now, I came down to Eastbourne and I got involved in Tech Resort, which was then just like a thought experiment more than anything. But we got some funding and we decided we would use it to promote digital skills amongst everybody, which is quite unusual, especially in Eastbourne. You probably find the same sort of thing in Margate, that there's a perception about what the town is. Mm-hmm. So we spend our time now trying to promote digital skills and digital inclusion at all levels, from coding with 8-year-olds to teaching somebody how to use a tablet for the first time, and everything in between.
Amazing. Yeah, you've done some great work down there. Thank you so much. So you've all clearly got very successful in your roles, but I want to touch on some of the challenges or setbacks you've faced. For me personally, it was really the transition into motherhood that I found really difficult. I was working as a freelancer at the time, and I found when I had my son, there just wasn't any flexibility or acknowledgement around, how I could keep my career at that level and also be around to see my son. And I mean, there's a whole movement currently now around flexible working and fighting for rights for parents. And I think the pandemic has really highlighted the inequality of flexibility, particularly for working women. And I'm sure we could do a whole nother panel talk on that very subject. But for me, like when I came off maternity, I felt like I had to kind of start all over again. And I'd only taken like 9 months out to enter that job market. And that's kind of the main reason why I started Keep Good Company, was to keep my visibility within the industry and kind of keep talking about, how I kind of navigate the tech industry. I'd love to hear, are there any obstacles or challenges that you've found based on the fact that you're a woman and how you've overcome those? Nicola, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, well, I have to say, working within the art world, I listened to the Women in Design yesterday, and it was just like, wow, okay, wow. And I guess that's the case as well with the industry. But I think, wow, in this area, it's a breeze, because there are simply so many women artists doing incredible things with technology. And perhaps also really interesting is there are so many women curators. Nearly every curator that we work with is a woman. So there's no issue in terms of making a point in that. But I think the challenges that I'm very directly affected by, I think it's more to do with myself and my expectations. As a woman, over the years of working in all different sorts of technology, I think that it's almost shameful to be a beginner in it, because if you say that you do something with certain technologies and you're a woman, you kind of feel that you've got to prove yourself. You kind of, there's certainly for my age group, I'm hoping Samantha will say that's different now, but for my age group, it's like, oh, okay, she's not very good at it, sort of thing. So if you're actually really excited about starting something, and to be that beginner and not very good at it is a real challenge. And so that's why teaching yourself, all of these wonderful online courses you can do and sharing skills on YouTube and stuff like that is really important. So I'd say the biggest hurdle for many women can in fact be themselves, and what they expect of themselves, and how they talk about themselves, and whether they will even allow themselves to go to certain events or activities.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think there's a lot around confidence building, and just kind of really how you talk to yourself and show up in the industry. Liz, what about you? Is there anything in particular that you found quite challenging?
Probably, and this is sort of back a long time now, so things hopefully are a little different. But when I was working for the insurance company and I desperately wanted to do more with IT, as it was globally called then, I wanted to join the IT department, so I applied and they wouldn't have me. And I'm not sure if it was because I was a girl. I think it may have been because I was the business, and the business and IT never really meet. So you can't possibly understand IT if you're part of the customer facing business. So I've got a lot of that. And then over the years working on those projects, the IT managers, and it was nearly always the managers, would always underestimate what knowledge I had and had to be explained to, let's put it that way, that actually I kind of knew my stuff.
Yeah.
And often you need to do that quite creatively without sounding too aggressive, which for me was quite hard. But just dropping in comments about things that were relevant at the time helped to kind of cement that feeling as, oh, okay, she's part of the business, and maybe, oh, she's only a girl, but okay, we can talk to her like we would talk amongst ourselves. And sadly then, and probably now, the vast majority of the hardcore IT industry is men, who need some of them need to feel like they're still needed to be exclusive, because that giving up of information and sharing of knowledge is quite hard for them. I'm really lucky in my home life and the people I work with that they love sharing knowledge amongst everybody, whoever they are, whether they've ever done it before, whether they're brand new to it, or whether they're really experienced.
Samantha, what's your view on this? What's your take?
Yeah, I think in terms of setbacks, personally, it's similar to what Nicola was mentioning about that confidence. I think imposter syndrome is this term that is thrown around still quite a lot even today with many women in tech. And I think you really do have to have a lot of self-confidence coming into this industry, because like Liz has just said, it is still quite heavily male dominated. But I think in my personal experience, I've always been someone that's been interested in STEM subjects. And so I've always been, the only, woman in the room potentially. So I kind of got used to it, going through education. So coming into the workplace, it wasn't that much of a shock. And I think there are scenarios where you really do need guidance. You need mentors who, have maybe been where you are, are female and have been in tech, and, are there to kind of champion you on. There we go. Because it can be difficult sometimes when you're still early in career. I consider myself early in career, and you're in a room full of men. I think it's more just giving yourself that extra boost that you do know what you're talking about, and it doesn't matter that you're only the only female in the room, because you have value to bring. And I think once you get over that, and I think it's the constant reminder that you have to tell yourself that you are there for a reason. There's something that you can bring to the table. Once you get to that point, you're kind of flying. So I think a setback for me would definitely be just earlier on realizing that I have what it takes, to not give up. And I think the second thing is just making sure you have a community, or you have people that you can lean on to ask questions, and who've been through what you've been through, and you can learn from their mistakes. So yeah,
great stuff. What about you, Kate? Anything that you've kind of set you back, and how you might have overcome those issues?
I actually think the others have really nailed this. I think it is about confidence. You do find yourself as the only woman in quite large conferences and rooms and things. But I do think that Samantha's absolutely right, that that kind of support network. You have to be brave, you have to be pioneering, you have to keep moving, you have to be agile. And part of that, I think, is it's very hard work to be pioneering and clawing out new ground while at the same time delivering excellence and doing the work. And I think to keep moving forward and kind of shore up what you're trying to do is quite difficult to sort of to do both at the same time. So I think that network and support network that Samantha was mentioning, and the nearest I've got, if one thinks about it as a sort of relay race, so you can move into the new territory and kind of claim and as Nicola's touched on, learn some new skills, consolidate, and then step forward again. So I think it's a blend of the experience of the other speakers. Actually, they've nailed it.
Great stuff. So I just wanted to think about, and we've kind of touched on this actually, but like if we were giving advice out to young women or girls that were really kind of wanted to start out in the tech industry, like what would the advice that we would give them? Samantha, can I kind of start with you? Like, is there,
Yeah.
talked about community and network and seeking out people, but is there anything additional that you think you'd add to that?
Yeah. So I would firstly say welcome. You know, if you're considering it, you know, you've been looking into joining tech, then please do come and join us. You know, I think there really is a need for more women in the industry, especially when, you know, technology is changing the world, you know, and we are in the industry creating solutions to problems. And obviously half the population is female, you know, so we need to make sure we've got females on board. So we're creating solutions for everybody. I think advice, understand who you are. You know, what do you like? What do you enjoy? There are multiple different routes into technology. You know, if you like to code, you know, go and be a software developer. If you like to design, there's UX design, there's UI design. You know, there's 3D artists. You know, there's so many different pathways you can go down. And I don't want people to just dismiss the tech industry and say it's not for them, because they don't understand that actually there is a spot for everyone. You know, there's a range of different skill sets that you need to be successful in the industry. And actually a lot of it comes from soft skills. You know, how can you communicate with other people? And I think women, you know, it's part of our nature, to be honest. You know, we are caring beings. We understand how to listen. You know, we know how to ask questions. And I think a lot of girls will find that actually some of these skill sets come naturally to you, and tech actually is a place for you. So I would say, you know, connect with people like us, you know, come and learn from us if you're interested in the industry. Do your research, be curious. You know, I've got my platform on Instagram, Becoming Samantha. Come and check me out. You know, I'm talking to women like this on the panel all the time about what they do in tech, to really just ensure people understand the range of opportunities. So that's my advice.
I'd vouch for that as well. Your Instagram account is amazing, and you know, the interviews where you bring people on and talk about the different types of roles that people can do, I think is a really great resource for young people that are just starting out and kind of like, I don't know what to do. So I think anyone to go and check that out. Nicola, what about yourself? Because you obviously run quite a lot of events, I guess, with young people. I mean, is there any kind of questions you get asked or advice that you would give to people?
Well, yeah, I mean, so first of all, so in the creative sphere, as I've said, you know, it's pretty balanced, which is fantastic. But what I think is really interesting is that I remember a conversation we were having recently about who comes to, for example, coding clubs. Within the art context, because it's in an art gallery, for example, or in a museum, there's no question in people's minds that their daughters could and should come along to this course because they've made that connection with creativity. And so we don't have any difficulty enlisting girls on board to begin with. And then, of course, they see each other as part of this realm and they accept it. And I think also what Samantha's flagged up here is the variety of jobs. I mean, everyone today watching this session is involved with technology. Everyone has technology in their pockets. There's nothing weird and wonderful. When I was working with Womxn video in the past, I mean, that'd be a handful of people working with that, but no, everyone is working with digital technology in some way. So if you think about how many people are working in technology, you could also imagine how many jobs there are out there, jobs that none of us are even aware exist, you know? So it's so broad. So anyone who says, I don't know what I want to do, there's a very good chance with the skills they already have, there is something out there for them. And I think it's just waking up to that realization that, you know, technology is a set of tools, and we're all working with tools all the time, you know? And I think for adults watching who have daughters, it's this, again, this connection with the importance of women being, or girls being, part of this world and exploring technology, because as again Samantha said, it's really important our voices are heard, and it's rather than using someone else's technology or software or what have you, you could be designing it and making it absolutely specific to what your needs are or desires are. So I think that's what's so powerful about it.
Amazing. Liz, do you want to give your take on this? Because obviously, you know, with the coding groups that you do, you have lots of young people through the door. I mean, what's your experience and what advice would you give?
I'd come back, Nicola's absolutely nailed it. It depends on context. And girls, where schools find the candidates to come to our code clubs, we usually have a 50-50 mix, because schools are very, very attuned to the need for everybody to be involved. Where parents book the sessions, we get next to no girls at all. And I think my big thing would be to mums, because let's face it, most mums are the ones who look after the after school arrangements. I know that's not universally true, but actually for us, it's mums that book and it's mums that drop the kids off. Is okay, so you might not be very confident with digital or not find it remotely interesting. That's fine, but give your daughters at least a chance to try. They might hate it too. That's fine too. I think the other thing is, to any woman or girl out there, try stuff, anything, tinker with things. Try a bit of electronics. It's never been easier to tinker with electronics, with things like Raspberry Pis and Arduinos. Try a bit of code. And if you think that code's really hard, go and look at Hour of Code, which does basic, very, very early on skills, but it's very sophisticated in that it teaches you how to code without you requiring a special language. And it doesn't matter if you're an adult and these things are designed for 8-year-olds. Go and play with it anyway, because if you start to find it interesting and engaging, chances are you'll quite enjoy that side of things. But like everybody has said, it isn't just about coding, it's everything. And in fact, I'm not even sure that digital is an industry anymore. I think digital is a thing, and that all industries now rely on it. I can't think of any industry that doesn't use technology in some way, from care homes that need it to monitor their patients through to games coding. It's technology's in there. So if you're already in an industry, you're probably using digital, or at least there's the opportunity. So explore that if you're looking to change what you're doing, and explore in the sphere you already know and expand your knowledge that way, because that's a more comfortable way of making a transition than walking out the door tomorrow and changing industry completely. So if you've got that confidence from knowing at least part of that industry.
That's great, thank you so much. And Kate, what's your view? Because obviously you've run the Geek Festivals, you've got a lot of work that you do with science centres and heritage sites. You know, what's your view on this and how to kind of engage and give advice to women and young girls?
Yeah, I build on what everybody else is saying, which is that it's in every area of life. So I would go to the thing that you really, really care about, and then look at the digital that's sitting within that. And that's what the Geek Festival was about. It's sort of like, hey, if you're playing a game, and love playing games, let's take it apart and look at how the sound, the music, the story, the pictures, the levels of game code. Let's look a bit at the code as well, if that's the bit you're interested in. So I'd go to the thing that you really, really like, but it is in every industry now, and in museums and science centres. Every part of process, from building costumes to building buildings to making the furniture. We were saying, back to Nicola's thing, that we've got a marvelous thing where we do graphics for museums, and they talk about camera ready artwork. We live in a digital world that's built on analog systems at the moment. So if I was a woman getting into tech now, I'd absolutely say go for it, because this is a time for revolution. And we need to remove some of these earlier working systems that are being held in place. And actually, there's much more interesting, much more innovative ways of thinking. And I think that now is the time to do it. And we definitely need the voice of women in there. And we need to really think more radically and innovatively. And I think we now have this digital confidence to release the full potential of the digital. And I don't think we have yet. So I'd go for it. It's a really exciting time.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to kind of touch on resources, really, and like what people could find out about more within the industry. I mean, in my particular field, there's a whole range of stuff around women in product. We have events that are focused specifically on product managers and their role within the industry, and it's very focused on mentorship and community and networking and that kind of thing. But obviously that's just a very niche area of product management. I wondered if anyone's got any advice around their particular, because we all do such different things here, around their particular area that they could talk through. Samantha, I thought I'd start with you. Is there kind of any publications that you read or any resources that you could kind of point people to about what you specifically do?
Yeah, I think, the internet is a beautiful thing because you can find any and everything on there. So, my particular field is customer success, account management, which is a little bit of a hybrid role at the moment at Microsoft. But like you say, there are particular kind of customer success communities that are being built out now. I think LinkedIn is a good place to start. I know there's young people in here, that there might be people further on in their career. Various different groups are being set up on there. I think generally across social media, there is now conversation about tech industry in general. So, there's a hashtag tech Twitter that a lot of people follow and interact on. And it's another great way to network and find other people who are on the same and similar journeys as you. To stay up to date with tech news, again, I'm looking across the board at things like TechCrunch, and BBC News has a really good tech page, and I try to keep the people that follow me up to date. I've got a newsletter that I send out in terms of the tech news that I find that's really cool, but also opportunities that I come across, scholarships and things like that people should be aware of. So there's a lot out there, YouTubers, the whole kind of wave of tech YouTubers that are coming through. So yeah, I don't think I could pinpoint any specific resources, but I would say the internet is a huge resource, and it's just kind of finding people that you align with, and yeah.
Thank you. What about you, Nicola? Because obviously you're quite a niche area as well. Like, is there anything that you?
Sure. So we use all of our artworks. We use mainly processing, which is an open source software. So you can get it for free online. And the wonderful thing about open source is that there is community around it. So there are people sharing tutorials, obviously videos and what have you, and loads of guides. So for example, open processing is a space where you can set up an account for yourself, much like you would Facebook, and you can look at people's code and you can tweak it and you can run it on the fly, see what happens. You can set up your own, so you build up a community around that, sharing things. P5.js is another open source language online designed by a woman. And and then there are masses more. And as has been said, it's finding your community. There are, for example, communities like Women Who Code. And again, there will be many, many of them out there. And they'll probably be for different age groups as well. I use Instagram a lot, and there are communities around there. And so just thinking carefully about a hashtag you use will automatically then lead you into a world of other like-minded people. And you think, gosh, I thought I was the only one that really liked this very odd bit of code or what have you, and you find someone else who's doing it. So yeah, obviously there is stacks out there. But the other one I'd say is that there are lots of massive online learning courses, and you can do these courses for free if you don't want a certificate. So you can try things out. I did a bit of oceanography, for example, and soil science, discovered it wasn't quite for me. But you can do these things, try them out and say, yeah, maybe. And then if you really want a qualification in it, you can pay for it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. What about you, Liz? Obviously, you run lots of different things for young people. Are there anything? I know you've mentioned some of the kind of Raspberry Pi resources that people can use, but is there anything else that you would mention for people kind of starting out?
The Raspberry Pi Foundation website is very big, so it's not just about the computer, but it's all about lots of different projects. There's lots and lots of stuff in there. We'll lead you step by step through things. So looking out for the Raspberry Pi Foundation website, and similarly with an organisation called Adafruit, which do lots of electronics. They have an incredibly good wide library of how to do this thing. And I always advocate that people, if they want to learn something new, is start with a project that interests them, because that motivates you through. And those sorts of resources are really good. So if you want to do a time-lapse photograph using Raspberry Pi with a camera, I can guarantee if you go to some of these sites, you will find some of that stuff you need. And that helps you go on to the next thing. So there's also there's a magazine called Hello World, which is an online magazine, and it's sort of aimed at schools for coding with young people. But again, there are cool projects in there. And as an adult relearning, which is basically what I'm doing all the time, I find it really engaging, and it helps me through some of the problems I need to solve. I think the other thing is local maker groups. So you're part of the geekery. There are quite often lots of guys in it, but a lot of the geeks that inhabit these spaces are usually very keen to encourage other people. So get and talk to them, get them to explain stuff to you, take what you've learned to them and stuff like that, and get involved if that's the sort of thing you're into. Meeting people isn't necessarily everybody's idea of fun, but if it is, maker groups and stuff like that are brilliant. And then they have offline or online rather communities in things like Slack and Discord that you can join in, and join local projects that are doing a particular thing. There's a big thing countrywide at the moment about repurposing laptops for the community. There are loads and loads of projects, places you could go and volunteer and say, can I help? That's a really great way to learn. And if you're passionate about it, and it comes back to go to what you love. If you think that's really important, get involved in those sorts of, they may be one-off or short-lived projects, but you'll learn so much about everything else as well. It's a great way to kind of find your people, for want of a better word.
Yeah, I love that, finding your people. And I think that's why Instagram and social media is just amazing, because you can literally, be a lone person in your town, and then all of a sudden you find all these like-minded folk, which is just brilliant. So thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. I'm conscious that we've run out of time. So I just want to check if there are any questions that have come into the chat. So I'm just going to have a quick look. Lindsay, I don't know if you've got anything that has come across from there. We've got people joining all the way from Arizona. How lovely. So there's some questions around if people are talking about computing degrees and There's some references here that we could list to later if people are interested in finding a little bit more out around computing and computer science. Somebody from Canterbury College has put their details there, so we can share that in the chat after. And then there's been some questions around Instagram, so we can link to all the Instagram accounts after this, so that everyone's got them as a reference. We've already mentioned that becoming Samantha's account is amazing for talking about different career opportunities, so we can talk about that, and we can link to that. I'll also share my Instagram account and the websites. So we do have a question here. For the younger people on the panel, what can the older generation of women in tech do to support our growth and success? It's a really interesting question. Samantha, I'm going to look at you because
we are
all young. No, we're all young here. Okay, right. So what can older generation of women in tech do to support our growth and success? Well, I think actually passing on your learnings to the next generation is always helpful, because, you know, you've lived the process that a lot of us are still going through. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of people, especially at Microsoft, who put themselves forward as mentors and, you know, really coach the kind of interns, apprentices, graduates coming into the business who are just, you know, completely new to not only the world of tech, but also career. You know, mm-hmm. How do you navigate a career, and how do you plan to maybe get to a position you want to in the future? You know, it's not as easy as ABC, and really it's a completely new stage of life. You know, completing education and going into the world of work, you know, it's a whole new ball game, and that's something you do have experience in. So I think that's an area you can grow others, but also grow yourself, because there are plenty of people I speak to who are way older than me and actually say that they also learn from me and my approaches. So you could also almost do, I guess, reverse mentoring with younger people. And then I think in terms of, you know, leadership as well, bring people along on that journey is another way that you could potentially grow yourself in your career if you've not been a leader yet.
I think that's a brilliant point. Thanks for that. I think for me, you know, I think what I tried to do with some of the stuff that I'm doing is just working in the open. So being really kind of transparent about, you know, the learnings and the failings with my audience on my Instagram account, so that, you know, because I think otherwise there's that preconception that you're just nailing it and you know everything, and, you know, it's about the growth journey and the career progression, and, you know, how you've got to that point. And so I think, yeah, just being really upfront and open about that, so that everyone can see that growth, it is really important. One other question we've got here is, what's the most unusual tech job that you've come across that people may not know about as a career option? That's a really tricky question, because there's some of these roles are so niche, right? Anyone got any answers on that?
Well, I do have a friend who, I think he probably still does it for Sony, the PlayStation people. He maintains the linker for the compiler that they write for games developers to use. I mean, that's way niche.
Yeah.
He started out doing other things, but I mean, you can get as special. It kind of goes to show that you can get as specialized as suits the way that your head works. Mm-hmm. I've always said I'm not a specialist in anything other than being quite good at lots of things. And we need people like me, but we also need people like my friend Paul, who spends his entire day maintaining a linker.
It's great. It's great. You only have to look at film production now. So much historically, post-production used to be the shortest point. You know, pre-production, planning it all a long time, filming it a long time, and then you just cut it together with, you know, a pair of scissors, literally. Now post-production can go on for years and years and years. And, you know, if anyone's been watching WandaVision, the credit sequence at the end of it is astounding, and all of those jobs some of us will never have heard of, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Great question around, do you think you have to work for one of the big tech giants to start out, or is it possible to get experience at a smaller company? Anyone want to answer that? I mean, I've done a bit of both throughout my career. I've definitely worked for big companies, and then particularly freelancing. I think I did a lot of stuff where I worked for, you know, academic universities, startups, where actually I got my most kind of knowledge really working at a startup, because you kind of do a bit of everything. So I mean, yeah, I would say try and get in anywhere. Probably smaller companies, you'll get more exposure and more training. But has anyone got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't mind adding to that. So I think any experience is great experience. I think there's a misconception that in tech, you know, you only work in tech companies, you know, big tech companies, when tech is cross-disciplinary, right? So you can work in any industry and work in tech. So if you like fashion, but you also like tech, you know, go and work for one of the big retailers. You know, if you want to work in media and also work that, you can also work there. So I don't think you have to work for one of the big tech giants. I think it just depends on what experience you want, but any experience is great experience. So yeah, go for what works for you.
Yeah, I think that's nice if you're interested and passionate about a particular area. I think it's great to merge them, right? So one other question. Is tech helping women during the pandemic to work from home, or is it creating a new generation of women tied to the kitchen sink while holding down a full-time job? Oh my God, that's such a great question. And I think, you know, we've got 2 minutes left. I think this could just open up a can of worms. But and I know there's a big debate, and there's lots of stuff that organisations like Pregnant and Screwed have been, you know, really trying to push, because I think the pandemic has just highlighted the inequality for working mothers around, you know, trying to work and also look after their children. I think tech's been great in that, you know, you can work from home and you can do that, but I think it's just around those expectations of companies around, you know, what you're expected to do, because you can't do both, and I think it's unrealistic to ask to do both. Has anyone got any other questions, I mean answers on this? I mean, Liz, you've probably got a bit of an insight into some of the parents and the situations that you've encountered with some of the kids that are working from or coding from home.
Yeah, I think the most interesting, and it relates back to our trying to get laptops out into the community, is that a lot of parents who are trying also to retrain. So we think about people, I've got a job, or I'm learning, and actually it's much more fluid than that. So we've given out laptops to families where maybe one mum was retraining to be a nurse, a midwife, I think. She had 3 children, all of whom needed to do homeschooling, and they could pretty much look after themselves, but they only had one device. And so mum and older child were staying up very, very late to do their studies, to allow the younger children to do their stuff earlier. And so I don't know whether it's put more of a burden on women, and I'm lucky because my circumstances, I don't have children to care for, but I think it's put a lot more stress on households which maybe haven't had, for whatever reason, everybody has their own device. And I think it's really shone a light on how that disparity will just get deeper and deeper if we don't address it.
Yeah, great answer. We're actually we've run out of time. I mean, I could just talk all afternoon to you all. Yeah, we've run out. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time and sharing your views with the audience. Massive shout to POW Thanet for giving us the space to do this, and also thank you to the audience for all your great questions. I think we'll try and address some of those in the link after, so that we can share some of the Instagram accounts and all of that kind of stuff. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Good afternoon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.